Deeper Cinema presents the 10 best supporting actresses of the period 1895 to 1919. In 10th place, Concordia Selander for Sir Arne's Treasure. A Swedish actress and theater manager, in this film Concordia Selander again acts with her husband in real life, Hjalmar Selander. Her role is small but a vital one, since she has a vision of their family's tragic ending, and that sets the film to a whole other level of atmosphere and danger. Concordia Selander had been then a respected actress in Sweden's theater for almost 40 years, and had herself worked with or helped the likes of Moritz Stiller himself, and Mary Jansson and Richard Lund, the stars of this picture. So in a way she was not only the matriarch of the family in the film, but a sort of theater and film matriarch of most people connected to this film. She would pass away in 1935, 7 years after the death of her husband.
In 9th place, Mattie Whiting for Shoes. Another actress who had been performing for decades in the theater, Mattie Whiting had experience to spare in Shoes, and the film totally needed it. Her warmth as Mary McLaren's mother in this film is central to it, especially since she was the only character who fully comprehended her daughter's sacrifice to get those new shoes she wanted so much. Supporting a deadbeat husband as well, she is what mostly keeps the family together. In this beautiful picture directed by Lois Weber, written by women, and focused in other women as well on the screen, with Mattie Whiting being so instrumental to its success.
In 8th place, Margaret Mann for The Heart of Humanity. Later specialized in roles of a matriarch, Margaret Mann did only her second movie in The Heart of Humanity, and had only started acting when she was 50 years old. For many years she supported an invalid husband in real life, and knew loss and grief firsthand, something that certainly helped her performances. In this film she was a Canadian mother who lost son after son to that stupid First World War. 10 years later, she would do a similar role for John Ford in Four Sons, possibly the best role of her life, in which she excelled. A Scottish actress, she would slowly lose ground after this big break in Four Sons in 1928, ending her career doing only very modest extra roles in films like You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Gone with the Wind.
In 7th place, Lillebill Ibsen for Song of the Scarlet Flower. The most tragic figure of this movie, Lillebill Ibsen plays a very charming role of a woman who suffers a lot by being dropped by a womanizer played by Lars Hansen. At that time she was Lillebill Christensen actually, but would soon after marry a grandson of the notorious Henrik Ibsen, and thus changed her name. Also a great ballerina, she was graceful and was a protégé of Max Reinhardt himself, who helped her a lot in the beginning of her career. She was later famous in Norway for decades, a sort of prima donna actually. She lived up to 90 years old, so she had a very long career, and passed away as late as 1989, having acted for decades in the Norwegian theater.
In 6th place, Lila Lee for Male and Female. The only actress in this list born in the 20th century, Lila Lee played Tweenie in Male and Female, a servant like Crichton himself. Other than Gloria Swanson's character, Tweenie character loves Crichton for what he is, and not by the status he possessed here and there. Strangely, Paramount thought for a while that Lila Lee might just replace Gloria Swanson as their leading lady, but that never materialized. Lila Lee had been proeminent in theater since she was a child, and was at the beginning of her career in cinema. 3 years later she would even star in Blood and Sand, a very successful film acting alongside with none other than Rudolph Valentino. She would later make the transition to sound rather smoothly, but being somewhat involved in an infamous case of death of her lover in 1936 damaged her career a lot. Her son, James Kirkwood Jr. would have some fame of his own, as a screenwriter of a chorus line in 1985.
In 5th place, Mae Marsh for The Birth of a Nation. Mae Marsh has the best performance in The Birth of a Nation, besides some overreacting in the infamous scene in which she hysterically tries to escape from a black man. That aside, she is charismatic and lovable in the film as Flora Cameron, and a most memorable actress in this huge hit at the time. She even manages to eclipse the leading actress Lillian Gish a little, not an easy feat. Mae Marsh was deeply respected as an actress and a real star in the 1910s, but a curious thing in her career is that she started as an extra in Griffiths and Mack Sennett's shorts, and would end it also being an extra in the 50s and 60s, mostly for John Ford's films.
In 4th place, Karen Molander for The Girl from the Marsh Croft. In the first film adaptation of a Selma Lagerlöf novel, Karen Molander shines in her supporting role, avoiding being just a simple villain and showing she had a heart by releasing the character of Lars Hansen from being stuck with her. Victor Sjöström would do better films adapting Lagerlöf's novels, but still this is a solid film, and Karen Molander's mature performance is possibly its highest point. She was in the process of getting a divorce from director and screenwriter Gustav Mahler, and in an irony of fate would soon marry no other than Lars Hansen himself. If in this film she releases him from any obligation towards her, in real life she became a loyal wife to him, and pretty much gave up her acting career in cinema in 1920, at the height of her fame and success. Considering her obvious talent, it does make everyone wonder how far she could have gone in cinema.
In third place, Dorothy Gish for Hearts of the World. Dorothy Gish had to act many times alongside her much more famous and respected sister, none other than Lillian Gish. She might have suffered many times from such a famous sister that cast such a long shadow, but not in Hearts of the World. In this film she even managed to turn the table and make more of an impression than Lillian, in a vivacious and seductive role that gave the film a much-needed extra edge. She steals every scene that she's in and shows that she also had talent to spare. In fact, she pretty much complemented her sister in films since she had more talent for pantomime and light comedy roles, while Lillian had more knack to more serious and dramatic ones. Dorothy Gish would act continuously up to the end of the silent era, and from then on only worked sporadically up until her death in 1968.
In second place, Marcia Menon for Stella Maris. If Mary Pickford was not doing great in her two roles in this movie, Marcia Menon would have stolen this film from her outright. Amazingly, she played the role of Louisa Riska in the film, a vicious person that adopts the Unity Blake performed by Mary Pickford, even though Marcia Menon was in fact 4 years younger than Mary Pickford. In the film her Louisa didn't really want a daughter, but an eternal servant to suffer stoically her horrible treatment. The fact that Marcia Menon's role was also of an alcoholic added an extra layer to her performance, a brave one for a 1918 motion picture. This was only her third film, and she would go on to have a modest career in the 20s, making her last film in 1929. Her powerful performance in Stella Maris stands out as by far the best of her career, and it was a pity that such complex roles were not offered to her after Stella Maris.
Best Supporting Actress of the period 1895 to 1919. Mae Marsh for Intolerance. Mae Marsh appears in this list again, this time topping it as the so-called the dear one in Intolerance. If the film is much more remembered as a gigantic enterprise that showed how much cinema could dream big, build gigantic sets and display epic stories, it is also relevant to say that the story that actually held the film together was the then contemporary and simple one, in which Mae Marsh shines and gives this uneven epic a much-needed heart. In a movie with 4 major stories in 4 different time periods, she was a supporting player as everyone else, but still her deeply emotive scene at the trial was for many years referenced as an example of great acting in a motion picture. Praised by everyone back then, including many famous and respected actors, it was little 5'3" Mae Marsh that saved the day and proved that even epics as gigantic as Intolerance needed also little brave and charismatic women like Mae Marsh to melt everyone's hearts as well. Unfortunately, Mae Marsh is not so remembered now even among cinephiles around the world, but a quick glance at her acting in so enormous Griffiths films like The Birth of a Nation and Intolerance clearly shows the true value of her talent and how unfair it is that she is not more respected and revered.